Hide in the trunk and keep quiet. The driver was as pale as a wall. I climbed in, not understanding a thing. Then I heard my husband's voice on the phone and the ground fell out from under my feet. Welcome to the Twists of Fate channel. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from. We're very interested. We hope you enjoy listening to this fascinating story. The morning was overcast, but Elena woke up with the feeling that today was a special day. A light October rain drizzled outside. Drops ran down the glass in winding paths. She lay there and looked at the gray sky, not daring to get up. The TV was already blaring in the next room. Igor, as usual, turned on the morning news and rattled dishes in the kitchen. The smell of coffee seeped under the bedroom door, mingling with something burnt. Her husband had never been good at making toast. Elena threw back the covers and sat on the edge of the bed, her feet groping for her slippers on the cold floor. She was 43, and she'd spent most of those years trying to please others. First her parents, then her husband. Today she was going to the bank to deed her apartment. Her grandmother, Zinaida Pavlovna, had decided to give her her 2-room apartment in the city center. It wasn't just an apartment, but an entire family history. Elena's mother had grown up there, and she'd spent her own childhood there, summers smelling of her grandmother's pies and cherry jam. There was the old piano on which she'd practiced scales and a bookcase filled with Chekhov's collected works, the spines of which she'd memorized. Though on the nightstand vibrated, bouncing on the wooden surface. Elena reached for it and saw a familiar name on the screen, Granny, with a little heart, which she'd added 5 years ago. Lenachka, are you up yet? Grandma's voice sounded cheerful, despite the early hour. Zinaida Pavlovna could be heard on the radio in the background. She always turned it on in the mornings, listening to the news and weather forecast. Granny, are you up? How are you feeling? What's going to happen to me? My blood pressure was 130/80 this morning, like an astronaut's. I'm calling to remind you of your document. Okay, take your passport. And you also need a certificate. I told you yesterday. The one from the housing office. I got everything together this evening. Don't worry. I'm not worried. I just want everything to go smoothly. This apartment is more than just walls, Lenachka. Our whole life is there. Your mother took her first steps there. Can you imagine? She held onto this chest of drawers, which is still in the hallway, and stomped towards me. And you fell asleep there in my arms as a little girl. I carried you around the room and sang you a lullaby. Remember the lullaby? I remember, Granny. Elena smiled, although Granny didn't see it. About the little gray wolf. Exactly. I want you to get the apartment while I'm alive and sane, so that everything is legal, so that no one can find fault later. Zinaida Pavlovna was 82 years old, but her mind remained sharp and her character strong. She worked her whole life as a math teacher at school and still solved crosswords and Sudoku so that, as she said, her brain wouldn't rust like a. Every morning, she did exercises by the open window, drank tea with lemon and honey, and called her friends who were dwindling with each passing year. Granny, everything will be fine. What time are you leaving? I called a taxi at 11. I'll come straight to the notary, as we agreed. Will you be there? Will you wait for me there? Yes, Granny. Igor said he'd be over too. He has some meeting in the morning. Okay then. The 3 of us will sort it all out. Lenachka, just don't worry. Everything will be all right. I'm not worried, Grandma. I'll see you in a couple of hours. I'll see you. And that's it. Something wavered in the last sentence, a barely noticeable pause between. Elena hung up and sat motionless for a few seconds, staring. Say hi to Igor. Grandma had always been wary of her son-in-law, although she never said so directly. It's just that sometimes when Elena talked about her husband, Zinaida Pavlovna would purse her lips and change the subject. Or she'd suddenly start reminiscing about her late grandfather, how he cared for the family, how he brought every penny home, how he never raised his voice in 40 years of marriage. The kitchen smelled of coffee and burnt toast. Igor sat at the table, staring at his phone, holding a cup in one hand and scrolling through the screen with the other. He was 47. He worked as a manager at some construction company, though Elena still wasn't entirely sure what exactly he did there. Previously, in the early years of their marriage, he talked a lot about work, projects, clients, and plans. But in recent years, he dismissed her with generalities. Fine as usual, nothing interesting. He'd hidden his phone when she entered the room. Or was it just her imagination? "Good morning," Elena said, pouring herself coffee from a Turkish coffee pot. A forgotten spatula lay on the stove, and the remains of an omelet lay black in the frying pan. Igor didn't look up from the screen. Elena sat down opposite her, cupping her cup with her hands. The coffee was too strong and bitter. Igor always put more spoons in than necessary. "Do you remember that we're going to the notary today?" "I remember." He finally looked at her, and Elena noticed that his eyes were kinda bloodshot with red veins. He hadn't slept well, or had been sitting at the computer until late, as he often did lately. "Listen, here's the thing. I have an urgent meeting in the morning. I can't reschedule it. The partners are arriving. They can only do it today. You go first thing, and I'll go straight to the notary. Victor will drive you." Elena frowned. Victor was a driver who sometimes worked for Igor's company. A few years ago, her husband began using his services for business trips, and then he began calling him for family matters to drive Elena to the airport to meet her parents with the train station. Victor was quiet and reliable, but Elena always felt awkward when someone drove her, as if she were some kind of important person. Maybe a taxi would be better? I don't want to bother him. He probably has his own things to do. What taxi? Victor is free today anyway. I checked. I already called him. He'll be at the entrance in half an hour. He knows the address of the notary office. Something in her husband's tone struck Elena as odd, too insistent, too confident, but she didn't argue. In 15 years of marriage, she learned to pick her battles. Some things simply weren't worth the stress. And then, maybe she was just working herself up for nothing. Igor had always been a businessman. He was always having meetings, negotiations, partners. She finished her coffee and returned to the bedroom. She opened the closet and stood in front of it for a few minutes, sorting through the hangers. What should she wear to such a meeting? It seemed like just paperwork, but she wanted to look presentable. Not for the notary. No, not for herself. And for her grandmother, who always said that a woman should look respected at first sight. Elena chose a gray dress, strict but elegant, with a thin Natalia belt and a beige coat she'd bought last year on sale. She styled her hair, securing an unruly strand with a bobby pin. She applied a subtle lipstick, touched up her eyelashes with mascara, looked at herself in the mirror, and was left looking more or less plain, but quite a respectable middle-aged woman. A folder with documents lay on the dresser where she'd left it last night. Elena checked the contents again, laying the papers out on the bed. Passport, Snills, a certificate from the housing office about family composition, the agreement to the transaction, a copy of her grandmother's apartment documents. Everything was in place, everything was in order. She carefully folded the papers back, zipped up her bag, and looked at her reflection again. A woman with tired eyes stared out from it, and the downturned corners of her lips a woman who had long since forgotten how to dream of anything more than a quiet evening without arguments. When she stepped into the hallway, Igor was already putting on the dark blue sports jacket he had been wearing for the past couple of years. His sneakers were lying on the floor, even though I had asked him 100 times to put them away. "I'll text you when I leave for the notary," he said, kissing her on the cheek. His lips were dry and cold. "And yes, there's one more document that needs to be signed. Victor knows. He'll tell you on the way." "What document?" "Well, an additional one. For paperwork. Some kind of power of attorney or something like that." "Nonsense. A formality. The notary will explain." He was already out the door before Elena could ask another question. The lock clicked. Footsteps echoed loudly on the landing, and the front door slammed. Elena stood in the empty hallway, staring at the closed door with peeling paint. Some additional document she knew nothing about. Strange. Grandma had discussed everything with the notary. They'd called last week, and Zinaida Pavlovna hadn't mentioned any additional power of attorney. Maybe Igor had mixed something up, or was this really just a formality? Elena shook her head in, pushing away her worry. No need to worry. She'd go to the notary and everything would be sorted out there. 20 minutes later, she went down to the courtyard. The rain had stopped, but the asphalt was wet and glistening, reflecting the gray sky and the silhouettes of the trees. Puddles bubbled at the curbs. Water dripped from the roof onto the entrance canopy. There was a smell of wet leaves and gasoline. A neighbor was warming up his engine somewhere nearby. A dark blue car, not new but clean and well-maintained, was parked at the entrance to the building. Behind the wheel, Elena spotted Victor, his gray head and broad shoulders in a dark jacket. He was about 50, a strong, solid man with gray temples and the wrinkles around his eyes that appear in people accustomed to squinting in the sun or peering at the road. He got out of the car to open the door for her, and Elena noticed that he looked somehow tense. His movements were abrupt, his eyes darting around. "Good morning, Elena Sergeyevna." "Hello, Victor. Thank you for agreeing to drive. I hope I'm not disturbing you too much." "Don't talk anymore. Please get in." She settled into the back seat, placing her bag on her lap. The car smelled of pine air freshener and something else, leather, tobacco, although Victor didn't seem to smoke. On the dashboard lay a pack of tissues and some kind of paperback book, a detective story, maybe a science fiction novel. Victor got behind the wheel but didn't immediately take off. He stared in the rearview mirror for a few seconds as if checking something. Then he glanced over his shoulder, then out the side window. "Everything okay?" Elena asked. Yeah, of course. Just checking the route. Traffic, you know." The car pulled out of the yard, past the arch, and merged with the morning traffic. The city was waking up slowly, like a person after a sleepless night. People were hurrying to work with umbrellas and briefcases. A street cleaner in an orange vest was raking yellow leaves near a store. A crowded line formed at the bus stop. They passed a school. Children were already gathering there, noisy and bright in their jackets. Past the clinic, where green-clad orderlies smoked on the porch, past the old bakery, from which the warm smell of fresh bread wafted, Elena looked out the window thinking about her grandmother, about how, as a child, she would come to her for the entire summer while her parents worked, how they would make vareniki, dumplings there together on a huge board, and her grandmother would teach her to pinch the edges with a braid. How they would watch old movies on TV like Office Romance and Moscow Does Not Believe in Tears, and her grandmother would always cry at the same parts, even though she knew them by heart. How they would drink tea with jam on the balcony, watching the sunset, and Zinaida Pavlovna would talk about her childhood, about the war, about her grandfather. Her grandmother's apartment was a refuge for her, a place always warm, safe, and smelling of home. When her parents argued, and they argued often, Elena would curl up in her grandmother's armchair and read books from that very same bookcase. When they bullied her at school, and she, quiet and shy as she was bullied, she wrote letters to her grandmother, and she always responded with long missives full of wisdom and love. And when her mother died suddenly of a stroke at 54, it was her grandmother who held Elena at the funeral, preventing her from falling. Victor drove silently, and this silence seemed somehow heavy, wrong to Elena. Usually he was talkative, asking about the weather, her health, telling her something about the city, news, or football. Today, however, he gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Every now and then he glanced in the mirror, not at her, but somewhere back along the road, as if checking to see if anyone was following. They drove past a park where mothers with strollers walked, and turned onto an avenue lined with high-rise buildings and shops. The bank was about 10 minutes away, maybe 15, if there was traffic at the intersection near the shopping center. And then Victor suddenly turned on the turn signal and pulled over to the side of the road, stopping near some garages. Elena leaned forward in surprise, clutching the back of the seat. What happened? We're broken. Victor turned to her, and Elena saw something strange in his eyes, a mixture of fear and determination, the kind you see in a man about to do something very important and very difficult. Elena Sergeyevna, his voice was hoarse, as if he'd been silent for a long time and was now having trouble finding the words. I need to tell you something. And I also need you to do what I ask without asking. Please, Victor, what are you scaring me? What's going on? He swallowed, looking around, garages to the left, a warehouse fence to the right, an empty road ahead, as if checking to see if anyone could see or hear them. Igor Petrovich will call me in a few minutes. He'll ask me to pick him up at his office. He'll get in this car. So what? We're going to the notary's together, aren't we? That's what he said. He'll be there later. No. Victor shook his head, and a shadow of either regret or guilt crossed his face. Elena Sergeyevna, you need to move to the trunk. Right now. And so you don't hear, keep quiet. Not a sound. Elena looked at him, not understanding whether he was joking or crazy. Her heart started beating faster. Her palms were sweating. Victor, what's going on? What trunk? Why would I hide from my own husband? The driver ran his hand over his face and rubbed his eyes. His hands were shaking just a little, but Elena noticed. I've been working for your husband for 10 years. 10 years driving him to meetings, business and otherwise. And for 10 years, I've been hearing what he says on the phone when he thinks that a driver is just furniture. Just a person behind the wheel who doesn't understand anything and doesn't remember anything. Who doesn't matter. Elena's heart began to beat even faster. Her temples began to pound. So what? What did you hear? Elena Sergeyevna, your husband plans to take this apartment for himself. Not for you. After the deed of gift is drawn up in your name, he's going to have your grandmother declared incompetent through the court. He has a doctor who will retroactively sign the necessary papers. Some psychiatrist. They've been in a long time. The deal will be canceled. The apartment will come under his control. The world around Elena seemed to tilt. Garages, a fence, a gray sky, everything swam before her eyes. She grabbed the back of the front seat to keep from falling. This is impossible. Why would he do that? The apartment will be in the family anyway. We're married. What's the difference? The difference is that he's going to divorce you after he gets the apartment and take everything for himself. I heard him discussing it on the phone with some lawyer. They calculated everything. Elena opened her mouth but couldn't say a word. Her head went empty and ringing like a bell after its syrup was struck. Victor looked at her with pain in his eyes. I know, it's hard to hear. I thought for a long time whether to tell you or not. I was afraid. Igor Petrovich, he's a serious man, he has connections. But I couldn't keep silent any longer. My mother, she was almost deceived the same way. You understand? Distant relatives, they forged documents, almost took away the apartment. I was young and stupid then, serving in the army, didn't have time to intervene. She still stood her ground later. She was in court for 2 years, but her nerves, it cost her. I still can't forgive myself, not realizing right away what was happening. I don't want the same thing to happen to you. Elena felt a tear roll down her cheek. She didn't even notice when she started crying. The tears flowed on their own, like water from a leaky pipe. Why should I believe you? Maybe you made this all up. Maybe someone sent you. You shouldn't believe it. I understand, but you can check for yourself. Hide in the trunk. Listen to what he says on the phone when he gets in the car. He always talks in the car thinking it's safe here that no one can hear. And then decide for yourself what to do. Elena looked into the driver's eyes and saw something real there. Not cunning, not calculation, just the weariness of a man who had carried someone else's dirty secret inside him for too long and could no longer bear this burden. "Okay," she said finally, and her own voice seemed strange to her, quiet and fragile as glass. "Okay, I'll do it." Victor got out of the car and opened the trunk. Elena climbed out of the back seat on stiff legs, looking around. The street was empty. Only a crow perched on a lamppost and stared at her with a black, shiny eye. "There's a blanket there. Lay it down," Victor said quietly. "And here, take it." He handed her a small flashlight. "Just in case. But it's best not to turn it unless you need it." The trunk turned out to be roomier than she thought. Victor folded the back seat to create something like a niche, and Elena climbed inside, trying not to think about how ridiculous it looked. A grown woman in a gray dress and beige raincoat huddled in the trunk of a car in the middle of the workday. If someone had told her that in the morning, she would have laughed. "Elena Sergeyevna," Victor leaned toward her, and in his eyes she again saw the same mixture of fear and determination. "Don't let me hear you. Don't move. He can't know you're here. Otherwise I don't know what he'll do." She nodded, unable to speak. The trunk lid closed softly, and the world plunged into darkness. First minutes were unbearable. Elena lay in complete darkness, feeling every bulge under her back, every fold of the blanket. Her heart pounded so loudly she could almost hear it outside. There was a smell of gasoline, rubber, something musty and old. She closed her eyes, though there was no point in doing so, and she couldn't see anything around her anyway. The car started moving. Elena felt it pick up speed, turn, stop at traffic lights. She tried to guess the route. Now they turned right, which meant they were on the main street. They probably slowed down at the crosswalk. Then they sped up again. Time dragged on endlessly. Maybe 10 minutes passed, maybe an hour. She lost count. Then the car stopped and Elena heard the driver's door open. Victor's footsteps on the asphalt. Silence. And voices at first unintelligible, then getting closer. "Igor's voice has been waiting for you. So familiar, so accustomed after 15 years. Traffic or what?" "There was a minor accident on the highway. I was going around it," Victor answered evenly. Not a hint of excitement. The door slammed. The car rocked. Her husband got into the front seat. Elena held her breath. "Let's go to the notary." "Go ahead, but don't rush too much. I still need to call." The car moved again. Elena heard the rustle of clothes, the click of a seatbelt. Then the sound of a number being dialed. "Hello, Seryoga. It's me." "So is everything ready?" Pause. Elena strained her ears, trying to catch every word. "Excellent. Get the documents ready. We'll come by tomorrow to sign." "Yes, the psychiatric report. And don't forget the date. It needs to be dated last month before the deal. Understand?" "Yes." Elena's breath caught. There it was. Victor hadn't been lying. Every word she just heard confirmed his words. "The old woman is as healthy as a horse, but that's not important," Igor continued, and a lazy, sound confidence appeared in his voice that Elena had never heard before. Or had heard, but didn't want to notice. "The document needs to be unnoticeable." At the moment of signing the deed of gift, she was already incapacitated, didn't understand the significance of her actions. Classic. Pause. Apparently Sergey was answering something. "What does conscience have to do with it, Seryoga? Business is business. An apartment in the center is at least 3 million, maybe more. For that kind of money, I'd do anything. Especially since the old lady is 82, she doesn't have much time left anyway. What difference does it make to her who the apartment is registered to?" Elena bit her fist to keep from screaming. Tears streamed down her cheeks again, but she couldn't wipe them away. She was afraid to move, afraid to make even the slightest sound. "Wait," I'm not finished yet. Igor's voice became quieter, more confidential, as if he were sharing a secret. I need to figure out something with Lenka too. After we transfer the apartment's registration, I'll file for divorce. She, the fool, doesn't understand anything. She thinks I do everything for the family. But I've been dating Christina for 2 years. She's waiting for me to finally leave my wife. The world in the trunk completely collapsed. Alina lay in the darkness, feeling something breaking inside her, something she'd guarded for 15 years. Faith in her husband, faith in her family, faith that she means something to the man to whom she gave the best years of her life. Christina. 2 years. 2 years he looked into her eyes at breakfast. 2 years he slept next to her in the same bed. 2 years he said, "I love you," out of habit. And all this time he had another woman. All this time he was planning how to get rid of her. Yes, I'll deal with Lenka. Igor laughed, and this laugh was the most terrible thing Elena had ever heard in her life. The cold, calculating laugh of a man who considers himself the master of the situation. I'll find a reason. Maybe I'll say she cheated on me, or that she's mentally ill. That much bored with incapacity would fit well in a family. Yes, genetics, I'll say. The grandmother is crazy, the granddaughter's the same. Seryoga, you're a genius, by the way. You gave me this idea. Elena pressed her palms to her ears, but it didn't help. Her husband's voice filtered through the metal and upholstery, straight into her breaking heart. Anyway, here's the plan. Igor switched to a business-like tone. We're formalizing the deed of gift today. Everything is legal. In a month, we'll file a lawsuit to invalidate the transaction. We'll have a psychiatrist's report. We'll find a neighbor as witnesses. There's one there who'll sign anything for money. Another month or 2 for the trial. By spring, the apartment. Then there's divorce, division of property. Lenka's in for the count, because the apartment won't be jointly acquired, but I'll receive it as a result of a court decision. Beautiful, huh? Beautiful, Victor muttered, and Elena heard barely. Restraint, but Igor apparently didn't notice. Okay, Seryoga, we're almost there. We'll call tomorrow. And don't get too cocky about the doctor's price. I won't give him more than 100,000. For that money, he should write a report and, if necessary, confirm it in court. Okay, let's go. Phone beeped. I'm hanging up. The car turned and stopped. We've arrived, Igor Petrovich, Victor said. The notary office is over there, across the street. I see. Lenka's already inside. Yes, I dropped her off at the entrance about 20 minutes ago, just like you asked. She said she'd wait for you in the reception area. Excellent. An obedient wife, that's good. Igor chuckled, and there was something in his voice that made Elena's fists clench in the trunk. Okay, I'll go. You wait here, in case you're needed. Maybe I'll have to stop by the bank later to pick up some documents. The door slammed. Footsteps on the asphalt. Then silence. Elena lay in the darkness, unable to move. Her whole body was numb, as if she'd been lying there not for half an hour, but for an eternity. Scraps of the conversation she'd overheard swirled in her head. The old woman was as healthy as a horse, but that didn't matter. I'll deal with Lenka. 2 years with Christina. The fool doesn't understand anything. The fool. 15 years of marriage, and to him she's a fool. The woman who cooked his dinners, washed his shirts, tolerated his bad mood after work. The woman who tried to conceive 3 times and lost 3 children early on, and he'd say, "It's okay, we'll try again." And then he'd stop saying even that. The woman who believed his every word, every promise, every smile. The trunk lid opened, and Elena squinted against the light. Victor's face was pale. Elena Sergeyevna, he left, and went into the office. She sat up, gasping like a fish out of water. Her legs wouldn't obey her. Victor reached out and helped her out. "Oh, did you hear everything?" She nodded. She didn't have the strength to speak. "I'm very sorry," Victor said quietly. "I should have told you sooner. I should have told you a long time ago. but I was afraid. Igor Petrovich, he knows how to intimidate. He hinted that he knew people who could cause problems. I'm a coward, Elena Sergeyevna. Forgive me. Elena looked at him, at this elderly man with tired eyes who had risked his job, and maybe something more, to tell her the truth. What a coward he was. He was the only one who turned out, to be honest. You're not a coward, she said, her voice shaking. You are the only person who treated me like a person. Thank you, Victor. Thank you. She took the phone out of her bag. Her fingers were shaking so much that she missed the right icon twice, but then she finally dialed the number. Elena took the phone out of her bag. Her fingers were shaking so much that she missed the right icon twice, but then she finally dialed the number. Granny, it's me. Are you at the notary yet? I'll be there soon, Lenotchka. I called a taxi as we agreed. Granny, listen to me carefully. Don't go to the notary. Turn around and go home. What happened? Lenotchka, you're scaring me. I'll explain everything. Just not now. Not over the phone. Please, Granny, trust me. Go home and wait. I'll be there soon. Okay. Granny's voice became serious without unnecessary questions. Over 82 years, she has learned to fit when things are not tolerates arguments. I'm going home. Waiting for you? Then Elena dialed another number, one she knew by heart, but never thought she'd have to use. Police. I need to report a fraud plot. The voice on the other end was calm and businesslike. The female dispatcher asked more than that questions clearly, without unnecessary emotion. Elena answered, trying not to stumble, although her lips trembled and her words jumbled. The address of the notary's office. The husband's name. The nature of the crime. She heard her own voice as if from the outside, even almost mechanical, as if someone else was speaking. Stay where you are, the dispatcher said. The squad will be here in 10-15 minutes. Do not take any action until the police arrive. Elena lowered the phone and looked at Victor. He was standing next to the car, his hands in his jacket pockets. His face was gray, haggard, as if he had aged several years in the last hour. Police are coming, she said. Victor nodded. They did the right thing. I'm ready to testify. I'll tell them everything I've heard over the years. Let them know who they're dealing with. They stood on the sidewalk in front of the notary's office, a two-story building with a sign reading Notary. Beliefa M.A. and plastic windows reflecting the gray sky. An ordinary building, like thousands of them in the city. How many fates had been decided here? How many documents had been signed? And how many of them had been part of someone's deception? Elena looked at the front door, wooden, dark brown, with a brass handle. There, behind that door, was her husband now. The man she had lived with for 15 years. The man she loved, or thought she loved. The man who had planned to steal her grandmother's apartment and then throw her out of his life like a used object. Strangely, she didn't feel anger. Not yet. There was only a numbness so deep and all-encompassing, as if she had been immersed in icy water. Her thoughts moved slowly, like fish under ice. She understood that she should feel something, rage, pain, despair. But inside there was only emptiness. Victor got a bottle of water from the car and handed it to her. Drink. You look very pale. Elena took the bottle and took a few sips. The water was warm and tasteless, but it helped her head a little. It cleared up. Victor, she said, tell me about him, about Igor. What else do you know? The driver was silent, looking somewhere to the side. I know a lot, Elena Sergeyevna. I've heard a lot over 10 years. He didn't really consider me a person. Service, function. In front of me, he talked on the phone with partners, met with... He hesitated with women. With women? Christina? She's been with women? For a long time, 2 years, as he said. But there were others before her. I didn't count. I thought it was none of my business. Lots of men live like that. What can I do? Elena nodded. She'd suspected it herself. There were times when Igor stayed late, came home smelling of someone else's perfume, lied about meetings and business trips, but she didn't want to see. It was easier to believe, easier to turn a blind eye. And about the apartment? When did he start planning it? 3 months ago, maybe 4. I overheard him talking with this lawyer, Sergei. They were discussing how to challenge the deed of gift. Igor Petrovich said that your grandmother wanted to give the apartment to you, and he wanted it for himself. At first, I thought it might just be talk. You never know what people say. But then he started seeing some doctor discussing documents. I realized it was serious. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Victor lowered his head. He was afraid. Igor Petrovich, he knows how to put pressure on someone. He once hinted that he knew where my daughter worked. Just like that, seemingly casually. But I understood this threat. If something goes wrong, he can harm. Not me, not her. So I kept quiet. I thought it's none of my business. Let them sort it out themselves. Oh, and then later I couldn't take it anymore. This morning I woke up and realized that if I keep quiet, I'll never forgive myself for the rest of my life. Elena put her hand on his shoulder. You did everything right, Victor. Thank you. You can even imagine what you've done for me. The sound of a siren was heard in the distance, at first soft, then louder. Elena turned and saw a police car turning onto their street. Blue and red lights reflected on the wet asphalt in the window glass, in the puddles by the curb. The car stopped next to them. 2 men, about 40 years old, in uniform, got out, and a younger woman, also in uniform, holding a folder in her hands. Did you call the police? The man asked, turning to Elena. Yes, it's me. It's me, Senior Lieutenant Gromov. This is Sergeant Petrova. Tell me what happened. Elena began speaking haltingly, confusedly, jumping from one thing to another. About her grandmother, about the apartment, about the deed of gift, about how her husband insisted she go first, about Victor warning her and hiding him in the trunk, about the conversation she overheard. The police listened attentively. Sergeant Petrova wrote something down in a notebook. When Elena reached Igor's words about a psychiatric evaluation and plans to declare his grandmother incompetent, Gromov frowned. This is a serious accusation. Do you have evidence? I heard his conversation with my own ears. There is a recording. Elena froze. A recording. She hadn't thought to turn on the recording on her phone. She lay in the darkness of the trunk, listening to her life crumble, and didn't think to press a single button. No, she said in a broken voice. There is no recording. I didn't have time. I didn't guess. Gromov exchanged glances with his partner. This complicates the matter. Your words alone are not enough for an arrest, but I can confirm this. Victor intervened. I'm the driver. I've been driving Igor Petrovich for 10 years. I've overheard his conversations many times. And I heard parts of today's too. He said on the phone while we were driving, I heard everything. About the doctor, about the conclusion, about the incapacitation plan. Are you ready to give an official statement? I am. On the record, under oath, I'll give it as it should be. Gromov nodded. Good. A witness's testimony is already something. And you also said that your husband mentioned a name. Sergei is a lawyer and a psychiatrist. If we find them, they will confirm it. They won't confirm it, Elena interrupted. They are in line. Igor said that they pay the doctor 100,000 for the conclusion. Bribing an official is already a criminal offense. If the doctor is state-owned, I don't know what he's like. I don't know his name. Gromov thought for a moment. Okay, let's do it this way. Now we'll go into the office and talk to your husband. This is an official investigation into the complaint. We'll see his reaction. If he signs or tries to sign anything there, we have the right to intervene and suspend the transaction until the circumstances are clarified. Elena nodded. Her heart began to beat faster again. Now she'll see Igor. She'll see his face when he realizes his plan has been exposed. That the wife he considered a fool turned out to be smarter than he thought. They entered the building. Elena, both police officers. Victor remained outside by the car. It was quiet and cool inside, smelling of paper and something official. A small corridor, several doors, notice board. An elderly woman sat by one of the doors with a packet of documents, waiting her turn. Is Notary Belyeva here? Gromov asked the secretary behind the counter. Yes, she's seeing people. But there's a client there now. Police. We need to get in. The secretary's eyes widened, but she didn't argue. Gromov pushed the office door open and walked in. Elena followed him. The office was small, lined with filing cabinets. A woman of about 60, dressed in a formal suit, sat at the desk, apparently a notary. Opposite her, with her back to the door, was Igor. He was saying something, gesturing, but stopped mid-sentence when he heard footsteps. He turned around and saw police officers in uniform. He saw Elena. His expression changed on first with bewilderment, then recognition, then something akin to fear. But he quickly pulled himself together. Lena, what are you doing here? And why are you with the police? His voice sounded almost naturally surprised, even indignant. A good actor, Elena thought. He'd been a good actor all his life, and she hadn't noticed. Igor Petrovich Melnikov, Gromov asked formally. Yes, it's me. What's the matter? Senior Lieutenant Gromov, Criminal Investigation Department. We've received a report of possible real estate fraud. We're forced to interrupt your meeting and ask you to come with us to give an explanation. Igor stood up, straightening his shoulders. He was half a head taller than the policeman, broader in the shoulders, and clearly used to people being afraid of him. What kind of fraud? This is absurd. I came to formalize a deed of gift for the apartment that my grandmother decided to give to my wife. Everything is legal. Everything is according to the documents. Here, you can check it. He pointed to the paper on the table. Notary Belyeva sat motionless, looking from the police to Igor and back. We'll check, Gromov said. In the meantime, I ask you not to touch the documents. Sergeant, record this. Petrova took out her phone and began photographing the papers on the table. This is outrageous. Igor raised his voice. I'll complain. Do you understand who you're talking to? Gromov calmly responded to Citizen Melnikov, suspected of preparing to commit fraud and bribing an official. I recommend you calm down. Threats won't help. Igor opened his mouth to object, but then his gaze fell on Elena. She stood by the door, her back pressed against the wall, looking at him. Not with hatred, not one with pain, but with a strange calm that frightened her. Lena, he said, and his voice changed, became softer, almost pleading. Lena, what did you tell them? This is some kind of misunderstanding. Let's talk, I'll explain. Explain what? She asked quietly. How are you going to have Grandma declared incompetent? How have you been dating Christina for 2 years? How can you call me a fool? Igor's face faltered for just a second, but Elena saw it. He understood. Understood that she knew everything. He understood that his plan was ruined. Where are you from? He began, but stopped himself. I heard your conversation in the car. Every word. About Sergei the lawyer, about the psychiatrist, about 100,000 for the conclusion. About how you'll deal with me later. Silence fell in the office. Notary Belyeva took off her glasses and put them on the table. Her hands were shaking. Gromov and Petrova exchanged glances with the air of people who got more than they expected. Igor slowly sank into a chair. All his confidence, all his arrogance had disappeared somewhere. He looked like a man who had just lost everything. Lenachka, he began again. Don't call me that. You've lost that right. She turned to the police. I'm ready to write an official statement with all the details. And the driver, Victor, he will also testify. He drove my husband for many years and heard his conversations. Gromov nodded. Okay, Citizen Melnikov, you will have to come with us to the station to give an explanation. I'm not going anywhere. Igor raised his head. This illegal detention. I'll call a lawyer. Call one. It's your right. But until the lawyer arrives, you stay with us. He stood up and took a step toward the door, but Gromov blocked his way. Without any sudden movements, the citizen. Igor looked at him, then at Elena, then back at the policeman. And suddenly he somehow went limp, slouched as if the air had been let out of him. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, let's go. As they led him out of the office, he turned to Elena for the last time. There was no remorse or regret in his eyes, only anger. The cold, impotent anger of a man who has lost and knows it. Elena held his gaze, and then he disappeared through the door, and she was left alone in a strange office with an unfamiliar woman, a notary with a broken heart and a strange feeling that the worst was over. She took out her phone and dialed her grandmother's number. Granny, everything is fine. I have some circumstances have arisen. I'll be there soon, and I'll tell you everything. Yes, I'm fine. I'll cry later. Not now. I have to be strong now. You taught me that, remember. 3 months flew by like one long, heavy dream. Elena woke up every morning in the apartment that had recently been their shared home and lay motionless for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling. Then she remembered Igor was no longer there. Not in the sense of life. He was alive, healthy, and under a travel ban, awaiting trial. But he was no longer in her life, and this feeling of emptiness was both frightening and liberating. The divorce was finalized quickly. Igor didn't resist. Apparently he understood that now was not the time to assert his rights. His lawyer, a young man in an expensive suit, tried to negotiate the division of property, but Elena was adamant. The apartment they lived in was bought with her money and inheritance from her parents. The car was also hers, registered in her name. Igor had he earned nothing to die haigung. All his businesses turned out to be shells filled with debts and dubious schemes. The investigation proceeded as usual. Elena testified, answered the investigators' questions, and signed reports. Victor also gave detailed, thorough testimony, including dates and names. It turned out he remembered much more than he initially said. He remembered Igor's conversations with the lawyer, Sergei, who turned out to be not just a lawyer, but a real estate specialist, as he called himself. He remembered meetings with a psychiatrist from a private clinic who was willing to sign any report for money. He remembered names, addresses, and amounts. Lawyer Sergei was arrested a week after Igor and the doctor. Two weeks later. Both initially denied everything, then began blaming each other and Igor. A classic example, as the investigator said. Rats fleeing a sinking ship. Christina, the same one Igor had been dating for 2 years. Elena, she never saw him again. And she didn't want to. Some 25-year-old girl worked in a beauty salon, Jaco, dreaming of a rich husband and the good life. When she found out, was under investigation, and had no money, she vanished. Vanished as if she'd never existed. Elena learned of this by chance from that same Victor, and felt something akin to satisfaction. Not schadenfreude, just the understanding that sometimes justice does exist. The December morning was frosty and sunny, a rare combination for their city. Elena was driving to her grandmother's, looking out the minibus window at the snow-covered streets. After everything that happened, she sold her car, no longer wanting anything that would remind her of her past life. And the money came in handy. The lawyer who helped with the divorce and the investigation wasn't cheap. Her grandmother's house greeted her with the familiar smell of buys, vanilla, and something herbal. Zinaida Pavlovna opened the door before Elena could ring the bell. I saw you from the window. Come in, you're probably cold. Elena hugged her grandmother carefully, tenderly, feeling her fragile shoulders under her fingers. Over these 3 months, Zinaida Pavlovna seemed to have become even smaller, even thinner. But her eyes remained the same, lively and sharp. "How are you, Granny? What will happen to me? I'm living slowly. My blood pressure fluctuates, but that's because of the weather. Come in." The kettle had just boiled. They went into the small, cozy kitchen with a cylindrical tablecloth on the windowsill and an old clock on the wall. Elena sat down at the table, covered with the familiar flowered oilcloth. The same one had been here 20 years ago and 30. She baked cabbage most days. Zinaida Pavlovna put a plate in front of her. "Your favorite. Do you remember how little you were?" Granny kept asking for them. "Another pie. One more." Elena smiled for the first time in a long time. The smile was genuine, unforced. "I remember, Granny. I remember everything." They drank tea in silence, and this silence was cozy, homey. There was no need to explain anything, nothing to prove. Grandma knew everything about Igor and about the investigation and about the divorce. Elena told her everything on the same day when the police took her husband away. She came straight from the notary, sat down on the same chair and talked until she was hoarse. And Grandma listened, stroked her head and said, "It's okay, Lenazha. It's okay. Everything will pass. The main thing is that you learned the truth. And the truth heals, even when it hurts." "Granny," Elena put the cup down. "I wanted to tell you. Thank you." "For what, granddaughter?" "For everything. For being there. For always being there. For believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." Zinaida Pavlovna waved her hand, but eyes suspiciously glittered. "You're talking nonsense. How grateful I am. You are my blood, my only granddaughter. Who else can I trust if not you?" "You knew," Elena said quietly. "I felt about Igor, that he was not who he claimed to be." Grandmother was silent, stirring her tea with a spoon. "I felt," she finally admitted. "I didn't know, I just felt. Old people have this instinct for rottenness." His eyes were bad, cold. He looked at you but saw something of his own. Not you, but what you could give him. But I kept silent, thinking, maybe I'm slandering this person in vain. You loved him. You glowed when you talked about him. I didn't want to ruin your happiness." "What happiness, Grandma?" 15 years of lies. You didn't know it was a lie. For you, this was a real life, with joys and sorrows. And what he was thinking there, it was his sin, not yours. Elena lowered her eyes. Sparrows were chirping outside the window. The sun was hitting the glass, drawing golden patterns on the oilcloth. "Granny, I haven't told you everything yet. About the apartment." "What about the apartment?" "Remember, you wanted to give it. Draw up a deed of gift." "I remember. But after all this disgrace I decided to wait. The investigator said it's better not to make any deals for now, until the case is closed." "The case was closed." "Yesterday they called me. Igor was charged with large-scale fraud and attempted bribery. The trial will be in 2 months." Zinaida Pavlovna crossed herself. "Thank God. At least there is justice in the world. So yet, I wanted to say you don't need to give me the apartment." Grandma raised her eyebrows in surprise. "What do you mean you don't need to? What are you talking about, Lenechka?" "I saved it for you. I lived here my whole just to leave you. I know, and I'm very grateful. But after everything that happened, I realized one thing. An apartment is just walls. It's not what you have that matters. It's who's next to you that matters. I have you. I have a roof over my head. I have a job. I don't need anything else. And where will the apartment go? What do I need it for? I'm already old. So what if I die? Live, Grandma. Live a long, long time. And when the time comes, then we'll decide. I don't want any more problems to start because of this apartment. Enough already." Zinaida Pavlovna looked at her granddaughter for a long time, and in her eyes there was something new. Respect, or maybe pride. You've grown up, Lenotchka. Really grown up. You've become smart, strong. Your mother, may she rest her soul, would be proud of you. Elena felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she held back. She would cry later, alone at night, into her. But now she had to be strong. For Grandma, for myself, for the new life that is just beginning. Okay, said Zinaida Pavlovna, slapping her palm on the table. Enough sad stuff. Tell me how it is, Victor. He helped you back then. Saved you, you could say. Victor. Elena smiled. Victor, he's fine. We call each other sometimes. He found a new job as a taxi driver. Now he says he's calmer. No more bosses hanging over his shoulder. A good man. Conscientious. There aren't many like him left. Yes, he helped me a lot. Not only then, in the car, but later too, during the investigation, when I was giving testimony. He supported me, called, and asked how I was doing, just like a human being. Grandma narrowed her eyes slyly. And he's married, this Victor. Granny. Elena blushed. What are you talking about? I just got divorced. What kind of men are they? And what about me? I just asked. Nothing? Elena shook her head, but the smile never left her face. There's a grandmother will always find something to ask. He's been divorced for a long time. His daughter is grown up and lives in another city. You see, a free man and decent people. A rare combination. Granny, stop it. I don't have time for this now. I need to sort myself out, figure out how to live my life. Zinaida Pavlovna stood up and went to the window. The sun was shining on her back, turning her gray hair into a silver nimbus. You know, Lenotchka, I've seen a lot in my time here. I remember the war. I remember the famine. I remember how your grandfather came back from the front. I remember how your mother was born, how she grew up, how she got married, how she gave birth to you. How she died, I remember that too. I remember every day. And here's what I'll tell you. Life doesn't wait. It goes on, and we keep thinking, then we'll figure it out, then we'll understand, then we'll be happy. And then he might not be. She turned to her granddaughter. You're still young. 43, is that really an age? That's your prime. You have your whole life ahead of you. Don't bury yourself ahead of time. What happened, happened. It's painful, offensive, scary. But this isn't the end. It's the beginning. You understand? Elena stood up and went to her grandmother. She hugged her, burying her nose in her warm shoulder. I understand. Granny, I'm trying to understand. They stood there for a long time, hugging, and the snow slowly fell outside the window. The first real snow, this winter. A week later, Elena met Victor again. He called and said himself that he wanted to give her something. They agreed to meet at a cafe not far from her house. Victor arrived on time, as always, punctual and neat. He sat down opposite her and ordered tea. How are you, Elena Sergeyevna? Victor, let's be informal with you now. After everything that happened, what kind of you are you? He smiled shyly, like a boy. Good. How are you, Elena? Better. Much better. The divorce has been finalized. The case is heading to court. Grandma is healthy. I'm coming to my senses. Slowly, but I'm coming to my senses. That's good. I'm glad. He took an envelope out of his jacket pocket and put it on the table. I was about to give it to him. What is this? Money. The same money that Igor Petrovich paid me for it the last month. I don't want it. I can't. It's dirty. Elena shook her head. Victor, this is your money. You earned it. What does Igor have to do with it? Besides, I worked for him, knowing what he was doing. I was silent. I was afraid. This money is like payment for my silence. I don't want it. Then give it to charity. To an orphanage, to an animal shelter, anywhere. But not to me. Victor was silent, then nodded. Okay, that's what I'll do. They sat in silence, looking out the window at the snow-covered street. People passed by, hurried, wrapped in scarves, with packages and bags. Ordinary life, an ordinary winter day. Victor, said Elena, I wanted to ask you, why did you dare to go in the car then? You said you were afraid. Igor threatened. What changed? He took a long time. He remained silent, twirling the cup in his hand. Mother, he said finally. I told you she was almost cheated with the apartment. They are distant relatives. She then went to court for 2 years, defended her case, but her health was undermined. Her heart gave out. She died a year after the trial. I am very sorry. I was young then, stupid. I served in the army. I could not help. Then I blame myself for the rest of my life. Why didn't I intervene earlier? Why didn't I understand what was happening? And when I heard that Igor Petrovich was planning the same thing with your grandmother, something turned over in me. And began me. I thought, here is my chance, a chance to fix what I didn't do then. To save at least one family from what mine went through. Elena reached out and covered his palm with hers. You saved Victor. You saved not only my grandmother and the apartment. You saved me from living with a man who didn't love me. From lies that could have dragged on for years. I would have lived in ignorance, thinking that I had a family, but in reality. She didn't, she finished, but Victor understood. He gently squeezed her fingers. You're strong, Elena. Stronger than you think. You can handle this. They sat in the cafe for another hour, talking about various things, work, the weather, their plans for the future. Victor talked about his daughter, who worked as a doctor, and his grandson, whom he only saw via video call. Elena talked about her grandmother, about her pies and wise advice. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was talking to someone she could trust. When they left the cafe, it was already getting dark. The streetlights came on, casting yellow circles of light on the snow. I'll walk you home, Victor said. No need, it's close by. I'll see you out anyway. It was freezing and dark. They walked side by side along the snow-covered sidewalk, their breath turning into clouds of steam. Elena thought about how strange life worked. Just 3 months ago, she was a married woman with a stable life and a predictable future. And now she was divorced, alone, and walking down a winter street with a man she barely knew, but who had done more for her than her husband had in 15 years. Victor, she said, stopping at her entrance, so thank you for everything. There's nothing to thank you for. I did what I had to. Not everyone does what they have to. Most people are silent and turn away, pretend not to notice. You're not like that. He looked at her carefully, seriously. You're not like that either, Elena. You might not have believed me then in the car. You might have decided that I was crazy or a provocateur. You might have told Igor everything then. I don't know what happened then. But you believed me. Ian. She trusted him and climbed into the trunk. Did that require courage? Stupidity? She chuckled. No. Courage and intuition. You felt I was telling the truth. And that's worth a lot. They were silent. The snow fell slowly, in large flakes, settling on her hair and shoulders. Well, I'll be going, Elena said. Is it late already? Yes, of course. Good night. She had already grabbed the door handle when she heard Elena turn around. Victor was standing under the street lamp and the snow swirled around him like in an old movie. If you ever need help or just to talk or, I don't know, have some tea, call me. Any time. She smiled. I'll call, I promise. And she walked into the entrance, feeling something warm spreading in her chest. Not love, it's too early for love, but something akin to hope, to faith that life goes on and there are still many good things ahead. She finally accepted her grandmother's apartment as a gift 6 months later when Igor's trial ended, and he received his 4-year suspended sentence. Zinaida Pavlovna insisted, and Elena didn't argue. Not because she wanted the apartment, but because she wanted to make her grandmother happy. And her grandmother was happy, knowing the family nest would remain in the family. She stood by the window in this apartment, now her own, and looked out at the spring city. The April sun flooded the room with golden light. Grandma's geraniums bloomed on the windowsill, and a teapot and 2 glasses sat on the table. Behind her, Victor leafed through the old photo album that Zinaida Pavlovna had given her granddaughter along with the apartment. "Is that you?" he asked, pointing to a black and white photograph of a girl with pigtails. "I was probably 7 or 8. I was beautiful." "I was?" He looked up and smiled. "And it's even more beautiful." Elena felt her cheeks flush. 43 years old, and she blushes like a girl. "Victor." I know. It's too early." "You're not ready." "I'll wait." "But what if I have to wait a long time?" "I'll wait. I'm patient." She turned to the window to hide her smile. Outside, the chestnut trees were blue. People were walking down the street. Children were laughing somewhere. Ordinary life, an ordinary spring day. But for her, this day was special. She had come to her grandmother's to help her sort out old things and tidy up the storage room, which Zinaida Pavlovna was planning to turn into a craft corner. Although the apartment now belonged to Elena, her grandmother would continue to live there. So they had a notary register, their lifelong right of residence. Elena hadn't wanted it anyway, otherwise she wouldn't have needed these walls without her grandmother inside. Let Zinaida Pavlovna live here, among her flowers and books, among memories and old photographs. The apartment can wait. It's not going anywhere. The clink of dishes came from the kitchen. Grandma was fiddling with the kettle, despite Elena's protests. "Granny, I told you to sit and rest. I'll do everything myself." "What more?" "I'll sit in my own house like a lady." "No, as long as my legs carry me, I'll manage." Victor, who was sitting on the sofa with an old photo album in his hands, chuckled. "Your grandmother has an enviable character. That's putting it mildly." Elena sat down next to him, so that their shoulders touched. "She's been so stubborn and strong all her life. She taught me this, only I didn't understand it right away." Zinaida Pavlovna entered the room with a tray of cups, a sugar bowl, a vase of cookies. "What are you whispering about here?" "About me, I suppose." "About you, Granny." "I tell Victor how wonderful you are." "You flatter the old woman," but Grandma's eyes sparkled with satisfaction. She sat down in her favorite chair, the same one with worn armrests, where Elena used to read books as a child. "Victor, please have some cookies." "Why?" "I baked them myself using an old recipe." "Thank you, Zinaida Pavlovna." "They were delicious." "That's good." "You're a good man, Victor. I can smell your kind." "Take care of my little Elena." Victor looked at Elena with that same look that made her heart skip a beat. "I will take care of her, I promise." Grandma nodded, as if sealing a contract. "That's good. Now drink your tea while it's hot. And put this album down. Lenotchka will tell you everything later. Who's on the cards? There's a whole story in there, enough for 3 evenings." Elena took the cup, feeling the warmth of the porcelain under her fingers. The chestnut trees rustled outside. Grandma Pfefflin was telling Victor about the neighbor who got a cat, and it took 2 sleeping on Graham's balcony. An ordinary spring evening, ordinary conversations. But for Elena, this evening was special. She looked at her grandmother, vivacious, cheerful, with a sharp mind and a kind heart. At Victor, calm, reliable, and genuine. At this apartment, which held the memories of 3 generations of the family, was now waiting its time to welcome a 4th. "What are you thinking about?" Victor asked quietly, leaning toward her. "About how life is strange and sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what you have." He carefully covered her hand with his own tenderly, as if it were something fragile and precious. And Elena didn't remove her hand. She simply sat, listening to her grandmother's voice, feeling the warmth of another person next to her. For the first time in a very long time, she was home. Truly home. Not because these were her walls, but because her people were nearby. Thank you for listening to the story. This was the Twists of Fate channel with you. Sorry for any errors. Write in the comments what you think. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel.